Well, I was just going to ask you, you said some things about disincentive in terms of prizes, but you've spoken several times about incentives. Do you have ideas about incentives?
Yes.
And Larry, I'd love to hear your ideas.
So let me just start out by making an observation about Google. One of the things that we seem to do really well is to create platforms that lots and lots of people can engage in and use without having any kind of top-down, manifestation. Lots and lots of websites use Google Maps. Lots and lots of websites use Google Earth. Lots and lots of websites use YouTube. And so when we create these platforms and we create open interfaces to them, we enable literally millions, hundreds of millions of conversations and interactions and everything else. And I think that's important because I don't believe, when I hear we're going to create a website for, this conversation, my reaction is, no, you're not. Or, well, maybe you will, but that's not the only place that the conversations have to happen. So you have to allow for this enormous scope and ability to permit many, many different conversations. Some of them are going to be at odds with each other. And that's okay. I mean, that's out of that, cauldron of different ideas come sometimes things that work. So in terms of incentives, I think the big issue here is an in-depth understanding, again, of the consequences of choice. If you understand what the effects are of your choices beyond maybe the immediate benefit, then maybe the incentives will change and cause different choices to be made. Making manifest the consequences of choice is the hard part. And it's the ability to gather information and let me give you an example. Deborah Estrin runs something called the Center for Embedded Network Systems at UCLA, and she has this great idea that we should instrument everybody's mobile phone so that it keeps track of where did you go during the day. And the whole reason for that is not to let anybody else know where you went, but to let you know where you went. No, by the way, why would you care? Well, one answer is that if we knew something about the local conditions, hazardous conditions, the pollution, maybe even some potential medical hazard that becomes known after the fact, you could go submit your trail to this analytical system that says, well, let's see, you exposed yourself to this and this and this, and maybe you should go take an aspirin, whatever it is. There's some sense of helping you get information that's relevant to you using these kinds of techniques. I think there are lots and lots of space for inventing ideas like that to get this global pile of information and extract from it the part that might be specifically relevant to you and that might cause you to make different choices the next time you get to make a choice.
I hope we'll have a chance for people to come up and ask questions. I don't know how we plan to do that.
Great.
We have a microphone we can pass around.
How about letting them raise issues? It's not as if we have the answers here.
So Professor Cerf said that you should raise issues, and while you're doing that, I'd like to ask that we think about maybe a slightly different point of view. As vital as it is to think about improving global consciousness, as important as it is to realize that we're all in this together, it's also important that we get things done. And to get things done, you have to do the opposite of going to 20,000 feet. You have to go down to the very smallest issue that you face and focusing. In order for us to eradicate smallpox, we had to find every single smallpox virus on the planet Earth at the same time and draw a ring of immunity around it. We had 150,000 people working on it. We couldn't at the same time be thinking about a lot of other things. At Google.org, we've sifted through 10,000 noble, wonderful things to do, and we've really come down with 3 or 4, and we're focusing on them. And we've spent 95% of our resources on those 3 things. And that's very disappointing. We wish we could have done more than those 3 things, but we couldn't have done anything worthwhile if we hadn't focused deeply on the things that we do. So the task at hand is to allow ourselves to live in that rarefied atmosphere of changes in consciousness, but acting in the very small, narrow, focused way that allows you to get things done. And the greatest leaders are able to simultaneously live in both of those worlds. And I don't want us to forget that as we go forward. And I hope we do have some people who will come up and ask us some issues, raise some issues.
I'm not going to ask the questions, but I'll have the mic. And if you guys can just wait for the mic, because it's being recorded to speak into that. So,
I'll raise an issue. Facilitating communication and conversation is wonderful. And yet I see conversations increasing and stretching across the nation or further among the KKK, among people with facile, dangerous lies about the causes and effects of global warming, pro-anorexia sites where young girls can meet each other and discuss their ideas. And so the question is, given our culture and given human nature, is facilitating communication, is it going to lead to solutions or is it going to lead to mobs? And is there anything we can do to affect that outcome?
I have one liner for that. I'm stealing a line from Esther Dyson, I think. Esther's line was, the antidote for bad information is more information, not less information, and not censorship. Your point's well taken, though. I don't mean to minimize it at all. I want you to think about it's 1460, and Gutenberg has just done his thing. And we discovered that people put stuff on paper that is wrong, lies, inciting to all kinds of things. And so is our response, let's kill all the printing presses and not make any more paper and prevent people from communicating? And I think our honest answer, looking 500 years over time, is that no, we have to have that communication. And in our country anyway, where the First Amendment is built in, burned into our Constitution, we recognize the potential hazard of freedom of speech, and yet we adopt it on the grounds that it's better to allow that speech and to allow people to assess what they think of it. This comes back to probably the single most valuable thing any parent can leave a child, any teacher can leave a child, and that's the ability to think critically about what they see and what they hear. Because they're going to get bad information from magazines, newspapers, television, radio, their friends and their parents. And they have to figure out what to adopt as useful information and what to reject.
And it's gotten more difficult because you now need to have visual literacy as well as regular literacy and numeracy in order to be able to apply critical thinking to what you hear and see. When I was a kid, I was a cub reporter at the University of Michigan Daily, and the slogan at that newspaper was, "When opinions are free, truth will prevail." Well, that's not completely true. It's the other old saw that freedom of the press is guaranteed only to those who own the press. So now we have a different world. Everyone can blog. Lots of people, 1 billion of the 6.5 billion people in the world have access to blogging and that kind of technology, but it's a lot more than the 3 or 4 or 5 people who owned the press before. Now the question is going to be, can we develop the kind of discernment and care as we digest information that we get more accurate sources of the truth? And that's a challenge for the next generation.
It's been mentioned a couple of times here, the power of context. Questions like the specific kinds of challenges that you're addressing, if we all put them in context, we can count on the system to probably over time subvert those. We keep forgetting that our real context is 13.7 billion years. And we live in the moment, but that's really the process which has produced us and everything around us. 13.7 billion years of evolution, physical and biological. And it's an elegant process. It's an elegant, creative process. And I think if we can ground ourselves in that context, we can be confident that human beings will have the intelligence and the consciousness to weed out those aberrations that raise their heads through time.